Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm overjoyed today to discuss a brand new topic on the Reality Revolution podcast, and that is the wisdom of the reality creation master, Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is one of my favorite characters in history, and it turns out he's a remarkably fantastic example of a reality master, a composer of reality, and carried an incredible amount of wisdom in addition to his martial arts style. Now, if you don't know who Bruce Lee is, I would be shocked. Everybody knows who Bruce Lee is. But if you don't, his real name was Lee Jun-fan. He was known professionally as Bruce Lee. He was a Hong Kong American martial artist, martial arts instructor, actor, director, and philosopher. He was the founder of Jeet Kune Do, a hybrid martial arts philosophy drawing from different combat disciplines that is often credited with paving the way for modern mixed martial arts. Lee is considered by commentators, critics, media, and other martial artists to be the most influential martial artist of all time, and a pop culture icon of the 20th century who bridged the gap between East and West. He is credited with helping change the way Asians were presented in American films. It's interesting, he was the son of a Cantonese opera star, so he was a performer from birth. Li Hoi Chuen was his father. He was born in Chinatown in San Francisco on November 27, 1940, to parents from Hong Kong, and was raised with his family in Kowloon, Hong Kong. He was introduced to the film industry by his father and appeared in several films as a child actor. He moved to the United States at the age of 18. He was a remarkable actor, and he had so many great movies. It was interesting when I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. I was bummed because they made Bruce Lee out to be kind of an a-hole, but he wasn't like that. Bruce Lee did something phenomenal. Now, we have talked on this episode about Napoleon Hill and Mitch Horowitz's wonderful book on how to find your definite chief aim. The definite chief aim is the key component of the Think and Grow Rich book. The idea is you find one big definite chief aim, and you word your chief aim, you write it out, and you say it to yourself before you go to bed and when you wake up. Now, there was a particular way that Napoleon Hill taught how to create your definite chief aim. You always give your name, you always say what you want, and then you say what you'll give in return. And he would say an exact amount, which I don't think is as important, but I've done this and it works. And I've seen so many other examples. I saw that Jake Ducey did this and it works. You write out your master plan. Now, I was going to read this to you, but just to discuss further, just check out all the movies about him. I'm most interested in reality creation on this podcast, and it turns out Bruce Lee could have easily been a New Thought author. The stuff that he talks about is fascinating. Something that happens when you become an expert martial artist is you get attuned to the forces of push and pull, of resistance and opposition, and how they interact in the elements of your life. It is often good to learn about reality creation from people who actually accomplished it. Oftentimes, these New Thought authors were great, but when you look at their life, they weren't as successful. But then there's some examples of real success. We're taught in neurolinguistic programming, you take somebody that's super successful and you find out how they did it. You model their success. You can find success patterns and programs. So one thing I want to do on this podcast every once in a while, if we can, is to model somebody that's successful. And I found a treasure trove of information. Bruce Lee was a big fan of Napoleon Hill, and he utilized his techniques, and we can see an example of how it works. So I want you to learn how to find your definite chief aim. But there's also some incredible wisdom that Bruce Lee gives about a variety of topics. And he is somebody that actually achieved everything by the age of 32. And so there's a lesson in this. Choose a big goal, because something happens when you achieve your goal. So he achieved his goal within 4 years of creating this definite chief aim. And once he did, he dies 4 years later. He achieved the goal and died not even 4 years later, shortly thereafter. So he wrote out a letter, and this is what he read to himself every day. Bruce Lee would say, "My definite chief aim. I, Bruce Lee, will be the highest paid Oriental superstar in the United States. In return, I will give the most exciting performances and render the best quality in the capacity of an actor. Starting 1970, I will achieve world fame, and from then onward till the end of 1980, I will have in my possession $10 million. I will live the way I please and achieve inner harmony and happiness." So here he says his name, and he says what he wants: to be the highest paid Oriental superstar in the United States. And in return, something that I do, in return, I want to help as many people as possible, and give the best possible service. If you say in return, it seems to enhance what you're doing. You're talking to your subconscious on why you want this and what you're giving in return. So it gives it some power, and then gives a date. I will achieve a certain amount of fame. He says starting in 1970. This is 1969. He gives himself a year. He will achieve by the end of 1980. He wanted world fame. So the most important line is, I will live the way I please and achieve inner harmony and happiness. And I use that line all the time. He is an example of absolute confidence. The most important personality trait when you break down Bruce Lee was his confidence, absolute confidence, which you must have if you want to create your reality, free from all fear or doubt. There was not innate, but developed through years of mental and physical training. If you want to learn how to overcome fear, follow some of the stuff that Bruce Lee showed in overcoming fear. And that's why if he spent all this time learning these techniques in a martial artist way, but we can apply what he learned as a reality creation master. Becoming a millionaire is the side effect of helping people. And in this case, he helped people. Your salary or influence is not an end of itself, but an imperfect measure of your contribution to the world. Clearly here you can see that he's found his purpose. And later he refers to it as a spiritual force. A lot of people spend their whole lives chasing the what and then worry about the why later. Instead, study the why first, and everything else becomes easy. You always hear people say that your belief defines the limits of your possibility, but talk is cheap. Bruce Lee is one of the few that lived his life walking the walk. If you always put limit on everything you do, physical or anything else, he would say, it will spread into your work and into your life, and there are no limits. There are only plateaus, and you must not stay there. You must go beyond them. Why am I talking about Bruce Lee? Well, I think that when you read some of his writing and read some of his quotes, then you'll figure out he was a master in reality creation. There's a lot of wisdom that I found in some of this material, and I couldn't wait to share it because I think there's a simplicity and power in it. One of the things that Bruce Lee was really good at was a very short punch. Within a very short area, he could knock you out in a short little punch. Well, he did that with his thinking and philosophy. He delivers lines here, single sentences that are like punches, that when you really ponder it. So this episode, you'll be able to listen through and just gather the wisdom. There's so much here. It's amazing, some of the stuff that he taught and said in his quotes. Now, to begin, I recommend that you read his book, Bruce Lee Letters to the Dragon. There are several letters in that book, and you get an idea of what he was like. And just to read a couple of letters that inspired me from the book. He writes to a friend, June Go, and says, "Greetings from Los Angeles, where, like many places in the States, business is not too good. Don't understand me, that this is a pessimistic statement, though the fact is just as it is, but like anybody else, you have your choice of reacting to it. Here I ask you, Jungo, are you going to make your obstacles stepping stones to your dreams, or stumbling blocks because unknowingly you let negativeness, worries, fear, etc. to take over you? Believe me that in every big thing or achievement, there's always obstacles, big or small, and the reaction one shows to such obstacles is what counts, not the obstacle itself. There is no such thing as a defeat until you admit so yourself, but not until then. My friend, do think of the past in terms of those memories of events and accomplishments which were pleasant, rewarding, and satisfying. The present, well, think of it in terms of challenges and opportunities, and the rewards available for the application of your talents and energies. As for the future, that is a time and a place where every worthy ambition you possess is within your grasp. You have a tendency to waste a lot of your energy in worry and anticipation. Remember, my friend, to enjoy your planning as well as your accomplishment, for life is too short for negative energy. Take action, never wasting energy on worries and negative thoughts. I mean, who has the most insecure job, as I have? What do I live on? My faith in my ability that I'll make it. Sure, my back screwed me up good for a year, but with every adversity comes a blessing, because a shock acts as a reminder to oneself that we must not get stale in routine. Look at a rainstorm. After its departure, everything grows. You have a tendency to waste a lot of your energy in worry and anticipation. Remember to enjoy your planning as well as your accomplishment, for life is too short for negative energy. So remember that one who is possessed by worry not only lacks the poise to solve his own problems, but by his nervousness and irritability creates additional problems for those around him. Well, what more can I say about damn that torpedo, full speed ahead, from a martial artist with a screwed up back, but who has discovered a new powerful kick? Yours truly, Bruce Lee. In another letter, Bruce Lee says there are two ways of making a good living. One is the result of hard working, and the other, the result of the imagination, which requires work too, of course. It is a fact that labor and thrift produce a competence, but fortune, in the sense of wealth, is the reward of the man who can think of something that hasn't been thought of before. In every industry, in every profession, ideas are what America is looking for. Ideas have made America what she is, and one good idea will make a man what he wants to be. Before he passed away, some asked the late Dr. Charles E. Steinmetz, the electrical genius, in his opinion, what branch of science should make the most progress in the next 25 years. He paused and thought for several minutes, then, like a flash, replied, "Spiritual realization? When man comes to a conscious, vital realization of those great spiritual forces within himself, and begins to use those forces in science, in business, and in life, his progress in the future will be unparalleled. I feel I have this great creative and spiritual force within me that is greater than faith, greater than ambition, greater than confidence, greater than determination, greater than vision. It is all these combined. My brain becomes magnetized with this dominating force, which I hold in my hand. When you drop a pebble into a pool of water, the pebble starts a series of ripples that expand until they encompass the whole pool. This is exactly what will happen when I can give my ideas a definite plan of action. Right now, I can project my thoughts into the future. I can see ahead of me. I dream. Remember that practical dreamers never quit. I may now own nothing but a little place down in a basement that once my imagination has got up a full head of steam, I can see painted on a canvas of my mind a picture of a fine, big 5 or 6-story gung fu institute with branches all over the States. I am not easily discouraged. Readily visualize myself as overcoming obstacles, winning out over setbacks, achieving impossible objectives. Whether it is the Godhead or not, I feel this great force, this untapped power, this dynamic something within me. This feeling defies description. And there is no experience with which this feeling may be compared. It is something like a strong emotion mixed with faith, but a lot stronger. All in all, the goal of my planning and doing is to find the true meaning in life, peace of mind. I know that the sum of all possessions I mentioned does not necessarily add up to peace of mind. However, it can be if I devote my energy to real accomplishment of self rather than neurotic combat. In order to achieve this peace of mind, the teaching of detachment, of Taoism and Zen proved to be very valuable. Probably people will say I'm too conscious of success. Well, I am not. You see, my will to do springs from the knowledge that I can do. I'm only being natural, for there is no fear or doubt inside my mind. Pearl, success comes to those who become success conscious. If you don't aim at an object, how the heck on earth do you think you can get it? In writing about self-cultivation, he said, "The point where to rest being known, the object of pursuit is then determined, and that being determined, a calm unperturbedness may be obtained too. To that calmness there will succeed a tranquil repose. In that repose there may be careful deliberation, and that deliberation will be followed by the attainment of the desired end. Wishing to cultivate oneself, one first rectifies his heart and mind. Wishing to rectify his heart, one seeks to be sincere in his thoughts. Wishing to be sincere in his thoughts, one first extends the utmost of his knowledge. Such extension of knowledge lies in the investigation of things. It cannot be when the root is neglected that what should spring from it will be well ordered. A rectified mind is a mind immune to emotional influences, free from fear, anger, sorrow, anxiety, and even fond attachment. When the mind is not present, we look and do not see. We hear and do not understand. We eat and do not know the taste of what we eat. Not allowing outside things to entangle this mind. In other words, outward changes do not move the mind. Its function lies in suppression of the senses and on reduction of desire. A gung fu man rests therein, and because he rests, he is at peace. Because he is at peace, he is quiet. One who is at peace and is quiet, no sorrow or harm can enter. Therefore, his inner power remains whole and his spirit intact. The nature of water is that if nothing is mixed with it, it remains clear. If nothing ruffles it, it remains smooth. To be one thing and not to change is the climax of stillness. To have nothing in one that resists is the climax of emptiness. To remain detached from all outside things is the climax of fineness. To have in oneself no contraries is the climax of purity. No mind, no thought. Discard all thoughts of reward, all hopes of praise and fears of blame, all awareness of one's bodily self. And finally, closing the avenues of sense perception and let the spirit out as it will. The highest skill operates on an unconscious level. Sincere thought means thought of concentration, quiet awareness. The thought of a distracted mind cannot be sincere. Man's mind and his behavior are one. His inner thought and outer expression cannot contradict each other. Therefore, a man should set up his right principle, and this right mind principle will influence his action. If you look within yourself and are sure you have done right, what do you have to fear or worry about? You require only to perform your own mission in life without any thoughts of aggressiveness or competition. Follow the will of nature and coordinate your mind and your will to become one with nature, and nature will protect you. Yielding will overcome anything superior to itself. Its strength is boundless. The yielding will has a reposeful ease, soft as downy feathers, a quietude, a shrinking from action, an appearance of inability to do. The heart is humble, but the work is forceful. Placidly free from anxiety, one acts in harmony with the opponent's strength. One does not move ahead, but responds to the fitting influence. One should be in harmony with and not rebellion against the strength of the opponent. Such art will preserve ourselves by following the natural bends of things. Nothing in the world is more yielding and softer than water, yet it penetrates the hardest. Insubstantial, it enters where no room is. It is so fine that it is impossible to grasp a handful of it. Strike it, yet it does not suffer hurt. Stab it, and it is not wounded. The law of non-interfering, one should be in harmony with and not rebellion against the strength of the opponent. Such art will preserve ourselves by following the natural bends of things. Consequently, we achieve immortality because we do not wear ourselves out. This theory is illustrated in Taoism, in the story about the perfect butcher whose carving knife remains perpetually sharp because it is always goes between the bones and tissue and never meets any resistance. To rest in weakness is strength. Alive, a man is supple, soft. In death, unbending rigor. All creatures, grass and trees alive are plastic, but are pliant too, and in death all feeble and dry. Unbending rigor is the mate of death, and yielding softness the company of life. Unbending soldiers get no victory. The stiffest tree is ready for the axe. The strong and mighty belong to the bottom. The soft and yielding rise above them all. The strongest is he that makes use of his opponent's strength. Be the bamboo tree which bends toward the wind, and when the wind ceases, it springs back stronger than before. Now, he was a great letter writer, but in many ways he was even better in these quotes that he would give. And one book I recommend that you read is called Striking Thoughts, and it's his different wisdom, and he talks about so many different topics in it. He really does cover so many different topics, I wouldn't be able to cover them in an entire episode. He is a true philosopher, and his intelligence and ideas impressed me, particularly in how he could summarize a complex concept in simple one-sentence verses. For instance, when he discusses talking about being a human being, he says, identify with your humanity. You know how I like to think of myself as a human being. The function and duty of a human being. A quality human being that is the sincere and honest development of potential and self-actualization. The energy from within and the physical strength from your body can guide you toward accomplishing your purpose in life and to actually act on actualizing your duty to yourself. Human beings are integrators. We do not analyze, we integrate. The goal of a human being is to actualize oneself. What I detest most are dishonest people who talk more than they are capable of doing, and also people who use false humility as a means to cover their obnoxious inadequacy. A human being is an eating, sleeping, physically maintaining, reproducing entity. A human being is an entity of feeling. A human being is a creating entity. A human being is the result of a marriage of natural instinct and control. Here is natural instinct and there is control. You are to combine the two in harmony. If you have one to the extreme, you will be very unscientific. If you have another to the extreme, you become a mechanical man, no longer a human being. So it is a successful combination of both. It is not pure naturalness or pure unnaturalness. The ideal is unnatural naturalness or natural unnaturalness. A human being is the creative animal. It is the creative ability of a human being that separates him from all other animals. To develop human potential, to promote the growth process and develop this human potential, we must get through social role-playing and fill the holes in personality to make one whole and complete again. We are capable of much more. The fact is that we live only such a small percentage of our potential. You do not allow yourself to be totally yourself. Society does not allow you to be totally yourself. Talking and listening. Most people can talk without listening. Very few can listen without talking. It is very rare that people can talk and listen. The fundamental moral question for human beings: what is the right conduct for a human being? What is the right, just, ethical, and moral conduct? Self-honesty leads to one becoming a real human being. What the hell? You are what you are, and self-honesty occupies a definite and vital part in the ever-growing process to become a real human being and not a plastic one. Somehow one day you will hear, hey now, that's quality. Here is someone real. I'd like that. On taking action, Bruce Lee said the necessity for acting on our beliefs and knowing is not enough. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do. Action is a high road to self-confidence and esteem. Where it is open, all energies flow toward it. It comes readily to most people, and its rewards are tangible. Only actions give life strength. Only actions give to life its strength, as only moderation gives its charm. Not to think, but to do. Our grand business is not to see what lies dimly at a distance, but to do what lies clearly at hand. The point is the doing. The point is the doing of them rather than the accomplishments. There is no actor, but the action. There is no experiencer, but the experience. The end of man is action and not thought. Though it be of the noblest, in this world there are a lot of people who cannot touch the heart of the matter, but talk merely intellectually, not emotionally. but how they would do this or do that, talk about it, but yet nothing is ever actualized or accomplished. There is a reward in doing. The doer alone learns. Mental motion is present with every physical action. When discussing Wu Wei, or natural action, he said that Wu Wei is natural action. The basic idea of the Tao Te Ching is naturalism in the sense of Wu Wei, inaction, which really means taking no unnatural action. It means spontaneity, that is, to support all things in their natural stage and thus allow them to transform spontaneously in this manner. Tao undertakes no activity, and yet there is nothing left undone. When discussing the mind, Lee says an intelligent mind is constantly learning. An intelligent mind is one which is never concluding. Styles and patterns have come to a conclusion. Therefore, they have ceased to be intelligent. An intelligent mind is an inquiring mind. It is not satisfied with explanations, with conclusions, nor is it a mind that believes, because belief is, again, another form of conclusion. To be one thing and not to change is the climax of stillness. To have nothing in one that resists is the climax of emptiness. To remain detached of all outside things is the climax of fineness. To have in oneself no contraries is the climax of purity. You are the commander of your mind. I've always been buffeted by circumstances because I thought of myself as a human being affected by outside conditioning. Now I realize that I am the power that commands the feeling of my mind and from which circumstances grow. The usefulness of a cup is in its emptiness. Emptiness equals totality. Totality of mind, totality of physical structure. In order that the mind may function naturally and harmoniously, it must be freed from all attachment to oppositional notions. The mind should be freed from the influence of the external world, to let the mind take its course unhindered among phenomena, not the cultivated innocence of a clever mind that wants to be innocent, but that state of innocence in which there is no denial or acceptance, and which the mind just sees what it is. All thought is partial. It can never be total. Thought is the response of memory, and memory is always partial. Because memory is the result of experience, so thought is the reaction of a mind which is conditioned by experience. A limited mind cannot think freely. The mind must be wide open in order to function freely in thought. For a limited mind cannot think freely. The mind responds. The waters are in motion all the time, but the moon retains its serenity. The mind moves in response to the 10,000 situations, but remains ever the same. Don't be a slave to learning. Learning is important, but do not become its slave. Above all, do not harbor anything external and superfluous. The mind is the primary. Sharpen the psychic power of seeing in order to act immediately in accordance with what it sees. The seeing takes place with the inner mind. Mind is an ultimate reality which is aware of itself and is not the seat of our empirical consciousness. By being mind instead of having mind, all movements come out of the emptiness. That the mind is the name given to this dynamic aspect of emptiness. And further, that here is no crookedness, no ego-centered motivation, as the emptiness is sincerity, genuineness, and straightforwardness, allowing nothing between itself and its movements. Don't direct the mind. Stand at the neutral point between negative and positive, no longer directing one's mind to anything. The mind is without activity. The mind is originally without activity. The way is always without thought. To bring the mind into sharp focus and to make it alert so that it can immediately intuit truth, which is everywhere. The mind must be emancipated from old habits, prejudices, restrictive thought processes, and even ordinary thought itself. To be on the alert means to be deadly serious. To be deadly serious means to be sincere to oneself, and it is sincerity that finally leads to the way. By knowledge is meant knowing the emptiness and tranquility of the mind. Insight means realizing the one's original nature is not created. Knowledge is of the past. Learning is in the present, a constant movement in relationship with outward things without the past. The mind itself is endowed with infinite mobilities that know no hindrances. A rectified mind is a mind immune to emotional influences, free from fear, anger, sorrow, anxiety, and even fond attachment. When the mind is not present, we look and do not see. We hear and do not understand. We eat and do not know the taste of what we eat. Sincere thought means thought of concentration, quiet awareness. The thought of a distracted mind cannot be sincere. Man's mind and his behavior are one. His inner thought and outer expression cannot contradict each other. Therefore, a man should set up his right principle, and his right mind will influence his action. The additive process is merely a cultivation of memory, which becomes mechanical. Learning is never cumulative. It is a movement of knowing, which has no beginning and no end. It is man's original nature. In its ordinary process, thought moves forward without a halt. Past, present, and future thoughts continue as an unbroken stream. Imagination. Recognizing the need for sound plans and ideas for the attainment of my desires, I will develop my imagination by calling upon it daily for help in the formation of any plans. Recognizing the value of an alert mind and an alert memory, I will encourage mind to become alert by taking care to impress it clearly with all thoughts I wish to recall, and by associating those thoughts with related subjects which I may call to mind frequently. And the subconscious mind, recognizing the influence of my subconscious mind over my power of will, I shall take care to submit to it a clear and definite picture of my major purpose in life, and all minor purposes leading to my major purpose. And I shall keep this picture constantly before my subconscious mind by repeating it daily. Recollection and anticipation are fine qualities of consciousness, which distinguish the human mind from that of the lower animals. They are useful and serve certain purposes, but when actions are directly related to the problem of life and death, they must be given up so that they will not interfere with the fluidity of mentation and the lightning rapidity of action. The remembering of previously learned material is knowledge. The ability to grasp the meaning of material usage of knowledge by interpreting material or projecting future trends in the use of knowledge is comprehension. The ability to use learned material in new and concrete situations is application. The ability to break down material into component parts so that its organizational structure may be understood is analysis. And the ability to put parts together to form a new whole is synthesis. The ability to put parts together and judge the value of the material for a given purpose is evaluation. True thusness is the substance of thought, and thought is the function of true thusness. There is no thought except for the true thusness. Thusness does not move, but its motion and functions are inexhaustible. If you learn concepts, if you work for information, then you don't understand. You can only explain. When a man is thinking, he stands off from what he is trying to understand. Liberate yourself from concepts and see the truth with your own eyes. It exists here and now. It requires only one thing to see it: openness, freedom. The freedom to be open and not tethered by any ideas, concepts. We can go on rehearsing, analyzing, attending lectures, etc. until we are blue in the face. All this will not be of the slightest avail. It is only when we stop thinking and let go that we can start seeing, discovering. When our mind is tranquil, there will be an occasional pause to its feverish activities. There will be a let go, and it is only then, in the interval between two thoughts, that a flash of understanding which is not thought, can take place. Balance your thoughts with action. If you spend too much time thinking about a thing, you will never get it done. If you're busy with your mental computer, your energy goes into your thinking, and you don't see and hear anymore. Instead of looking directly into the fact, one clings to forms, theories, and goes on intertangling themselves further and further, finally putting oneself into an inextricable snare. Instead of dedicating your life to actualize a concept of what you should be like, actualize yourself. The process of maturing does not mean to become a captive of conceptualization. It is to come to the realization of what lies in our innermost selves. Life is better lived than conceptualized. This writing can be made less demanding should I allow myself to indulge in the usual manipulating game of role creation. Fortunately for me, my self-knowledge has transcended that, and I've come to an understanding that life is best to be lived, not to be conceptualized. If you have to think, you still do not understand. Don't be carried away in thought. Absence of thought is the doctrine, and it means not to be carried away by thought in the process of thought, not to be defiled by external objects, to be in thought yet devoid of thought. Concepts prevent feeling. Don't think, feel. Feeling exists here and now, when not interrupted and dissected by ideas or concepts. The moment we stop analyzing and let go, we can start really seeing and feeling as one whole. There is no actor or the one being acted upon, but the action itself. I stayed with my feeling then, and I felt it to the full without naming it. That. At last, the I and the feeling merged to become one. The I no longer feels the self to be separated from the you, and the whole idea of taking advantage of getting something out of something becomes absurd. To me, I have no other self, not to mention thought, than the oneness of things of which I was aware at that moment. Abstract analysis is not the answer. There is too much tendency to look inward at one's own moods and to try and evaluate them. To stand on the outside and try to look inside is futile. Whatever was there will go away. This also applies to a nebulous thing described as happiness. To try to identify it is like turning on a light to look at darkness, analyze it, and it is gone. When discussing knowledge, Bruce Lee explained, the object of knowing is constantly changing. Feeling, tasting, sensational experiment are dogmas and not true knowledge, as they can be wrong. Objects of perception, therefore, are ruled out of true knowledge. Knowledge is not simply perception. Objects of thought, rather than objects of perception, are real, more perfect, intellectual, and constant. Knowledge will give you power, but character respect. Learning is discovery, this discovery of the cause of our ignorance. However, the best way of learning is not the computation of information. Learning is discovering, uncovering what is there in us. When we discover, we are uncovering our own ability, our own eyes, in order to find our potential, to see what is going on, to discover how we can enlarge our lives, to find means at our disposal that will let us cope with a difficult situation. And all this, I maintain, is taking place in the here and now. Bruce Lee also liked to discuss ideas, stating that ideas are the beginning of all achievement in every industry, in every profession. Ideas are what America is looking for. Ideas have made America what she is, and one good idea will make a man what he wants to be. New ideas are always rewarded. It is a fact that labor and thrift produce a competence, but fortune, in the sense of wealth, is the reward of the man who can think of something that hasn't been thought of before. Simple ideas are copies of simple impressions. For example, I see something exciting, and that certain something moves me, and because of this impression, I can later on have an idea of it. Therefore, simple ideas are direct copies of simple impressions and cannot be broken into parts, but are a unifying whole. Complex impressions and complex ideas are in general a copy of the other. In some unusual cases, they are not so. For instance, I can imagine a place where I have never been, or in the case of a man who is colorblind, of the color blue, may make up his idea of that color with his experience of the other colors. There are three types of ideas: innate ideas, inborn; adventitious ideas from outside events; and factitious ideas which one invents. There are 4 idea principles. Number 1, find a human need, an unsolved problem. 2, master all of the essentials of the problem. 3, give a new twist to an old principle. And 4, believe in your idea and act. There's a 5-step process to formulating ideas. First, gather materials. Second, masticate the facts. Third, relax and drop the whole subject. Fourth, be ready and recognize and welcome the idea when it comes. And 5, shape and develop your idea into usefulness. To develop the creative attitude, analyze, focus on the wanted solutions. Seek out and fill your mind with the facts. Write down ideas, both sensible and seemingly wild. Let the facts and ideas simmer in your mind. Evaluate, recheck, settle on the creative ideas. Any idea that is constantly held in the mind and emotionalized begins at once to clothe itself in the most convenient and appropriate physical form that is available. The thing in which error arrives is judgment. An idea by itself is not erroneous, but judgment makes it. When talking about perception, Bruce Lee would say that not conviction, not method, but perception is the way of truth. It is a way of effortless awareness, pliable awareness, choiceless awareness. Perception is a continuous awareness. Require not just a moment of perception, but a continuous awareness, a continuous state of inquiry in which there is no conclusion. A wonderful mental exercise. When you are awake, you must be fully awake and conscious about everything. This is a wonderful mental exercise. The perceiving mind understands truth. There is no condemnation, no demand for a pattern of action in understanding. You are merely observing. Just look at it and watch. The perceiving mind is living, moving, full of energy, and only such a mind can understand what truth is. To see a thing uncolored by one's own personal preferences and desires is to see it in his own pristine simplicity. Perception implies existence to be perceived. There is always something existing, the genuine object of our perception. Sense data is caused by physical objects, and yet sense data is not in complete resemblance with the physical objects. Experience, in fact, can be said to be a constant affecting by physical objects. The relation of sense data to the object being perceived, sense data is part of the surface of the physical object. One is a function of the other. You can't discard either one of them. What we experience are the effects of physical objects. The philosophical problem of perception. What must the world be like in order for us to perceive? What do we perceive? Sense data is caused by physical objects. In order to find out about the actual objects in front of us, reason and rational thinking are necessary. The statement, I see a T, means there exists an object, I see a T, an inference based upon identity of the object. There are physical objects. There are 3 layers of awareness. Awareness covers 3 layers. Awareness of self, awareness of in-between, and awareness of the world. The enemy of development is this pain phobia. Fear versus awareness. The unwillingness to do a tiny bit of suffering. As you feel unpleasant, you interrupt the continuum of awareness and you become phobic. So therapeutically speaking, we can continue to grow by means of integrating awareness and attention. Choiceless awareness is total comprehension, non-duality, and reconciliation. It equals total understanding. The choiceless awareness of a single and undivided mind. Just watch choicelessly, and in the watching lies the wonder. It is not an ideal, an end to be desired. The watching is a state of being, already not a state of becoming. To be a calm beholder of what is happening around you. There is an awareness without choice, without any demand. An awareness in which there is no anxiety, and in that state of mind there is perception. It is the perception alone that will resolve all our problems. Choiceless awareness, do not condemn, do not justify. Awareness only works if it is allowed free play without interference. Do not start from a conclusion. To understand, surely there must be a state of choiceless awareness in which there is no sense of comparison or condemnation, no waiting for a further development of the thing we are talking about in order to agree or disagree. Don't start from a conclusion above all. Pure seeing, to see where there is no something. This is true seeing. The seeing is the result of having nothing to stand on. It is simply pure seeing, beyond the subject, an object, and therefore no seeing. On the ego and self-consciousness, Bruce Lee said, you must lose the attitude. Do not have an attitude. Open yourself and focus yourself and express yourself. Reject external form that fails to express internal reality. The ego as obstacle to acceptance. It is the ego that stands rigidly against things coming from the outside, and is this ego rigidity that makes it impossible for us to accept everything that confronts us. Oftentimes people will come up to me and ask, Bruce, are you really that good? And I say, well, if I tell you I'm good, probably you will say I'm boasting. But if I tell you I'm no good, you'll know I'm lying. I have the absolute confidence not to be number 2, but then I have enough sense also to realize that there can be no number 1. I don't like to wear stuffy clothes and be at places where everyone is trying to impress each other. The point to be made about ego is that man should use his ego and not be used by ego or blinded by it. The ego is fixed entirely by application of self-suggestion. Those who are materialistic hold on to the ego as though it were a possession rather than using it as a tool. Inwardly, psychologically, be a nobody. Establish nothing in regard to oneself. Let things be what they are. Move like water. Rest like a mirror. Respond like an echo. Pass quickly like the non-existent. And be quiet as purity. Those who gain loses. Do not precede others. Always follow them. To be humble to superiors is duty. To To equals is courtesy, to inferiors is nobleness, and to all, safety. Because one's self-consciousness or ego consciousness is too conspicuously present over the entire range of his intention, which fact interferes with the free display of whatever proficiency he has so far acquired or is going to acquire. One should get rid of this obtruding self or ego consciousness and apply himself to the work to be done as if nothing particular were taking place at the moment. Most of us suffer being self-conscious, being looked upon, then to realize our blindness and get our eyes again. The impasse is marked by a phobic attitude and avoidance. To be consciously unconscious or to be unconsciously conscious is the secret of nirvana. The act is so direct and immediate that intellection finds no room here to insert itself and cut it to pieces. This clinging and possession of ego consciousness, seeking to affirm itself in liberation, craftily tires to outwit reality by rejecting the thoughts it possesses and emptying the mirror of the mind which it also possesses. Emptiness itself is regarded as a possession and an attainment. The ego boundary is the differentiation between the self and the otherness. If the ego boundary is a fixed thing, then it becomes character or an armor like the turtle. Inside ego boundary there is cohesion, love, cooperation. Outside the ego boundary there is suspicion, strangeness, and unfamiliarity. Turn into a doll made of wood. It has no ego, it thinks of nothing, it has no grasping or sticky. And let the body and limbs work themselves out in accordance with the discipline they have undergone. Consciousness of self implies a duality and objectification of subject, which is reflected on an object distinct from itself, or which it creates as such. A complete liberation from the grip of the past, from all mental habits, and all attachment to our memories. What man has got to get over is the consciousness of himself. It is not I am doing this, but rather an inner realization that this is happening through me, or it is doing this for me. The consciousness of self is the greatest hindrance to the proper execution of all physical action. We can see through others only when we see through ourselves. Lack of self-awareness renders us transparent. A soul that knows itself is opaque. When discussing concentration, he said that concentration is a form of exclusion. And where there is exclusion, there is a thinker who excludes. It is the thinker, the excluder, the one who concentrates, that creates contradiction, because then there is a center from which there can be a deviation, a distraction. Concentration is a narrowing down of the mind, but we are concerned with the total process of living, and to concentrate exclusively on any particular aspects of life belittles life. A concentrated mind is not an attentive mind, but a mind that is in the state of awareness can concentrate. Awareness is never exclusive. It includes everything. One great cause of failure is a lack of concentration. On reason, Bruce Lee says that the light of nature is something translated as light of reason. Recognizing that both my positive and negative emotions may be dangerous if they're not controlled and guided to desirable ends, I will submit all my desires, aims, and purposes to my faculty of reason, and I will be guided by it in giving expression to these. On emotion, Bruce Lee says that conscience is your pilot. Recognizing that my emotions often err in their overenthusiasm and my faculty of reason often is without the warmth of feeling that is necessary to enable me to combine justice with mercy in my judgments. I will encourage my conscience to guide me as to what is right and what is wrong, but I will never set aside the verdicts it renders, no matter what may be the cost of carrying them out. Every emotion expresses itself in the muscular system. Anxiety is a tremendous excitement held bottled up. Any anger that is not coming out, flowing freely, will turn it into sadism, power drive, stammering, and other means of torturing. Emotions, the most important motors of our behavior. The subconscious mind favors thoughts inspired by emotional feelings. It also gives preference to dominating thoughts. Realizing that my emotions are both positive and negative, I will form daily habits which will encourage the development of the positive emotions and aid me in converting the negative emotions into some form of useful action. Unhappiness. Bruce Lee says that the measure of a moral worth of a man is his happiness. And in order to achieve happiness or the right conduct of life, one must acquire knowledge so he can think, reason, and create. Knowledge creates desire for the beautiful. Therefore, anyone that teaches must have the knowledge of his teaching. I like light rain. It gives one such a sense of calmness and tranquility. I enjoy walking in the rain, but most of all, I like books. I read all types of books, fiction and nonfiction. Everybody is capable of obtaining happiness. But the matter of going on or taking action to obtain it is in question. When talking about fear, Bruce Lee says to understand your fear is the beginning of really seeing. There is intelligence when you are not afraid. Sensitivity is not possible if you are afraid of this or that. There can be no initiative if one has fear, and fear compels us to cling to tradition and gurus, etc. The inner authority game. Authority destroys intelligence. Shame is fear of humiliation at one's inferior status in the estimation of others. Pride emphasizes the importance of the superiority of one's status in the eyes of others. There is fear and insecurity in pride, for when one aims at being highly esteemed and having achieved such status, he is automatically involved in the fear of losing one's status. Then protection of his status appears to be his most important need, and this creates anxiety. The fear of not being esteemed by others. The inner self is the true self. In order to realize our true self, we must be willing to live without being dependent upon the opinion of others. When we are completely self-sufficient, we can have no fear of not being esteemed by others. We should devote ourselves to being self-sufficient and must not depend on the external rating by others for our happiness. So it is true, the more we value things, the less we value ourselves. The more we depend upon others for esteem, the less we are self-sufficient. When discussing will, Bruce Lee says, it is the will that makes men. Success takes perseverance. My will to do springs from the knowledge that I can do. I'm only being natural, for there is no fear or doubt inside my mind. The power of will is the supreme court over all other departments of my mind. I will exercise it daily when I need the urge to action for any purpose, and I will form habits designed to bring the power of my will into action at least once daily. The yielding will has a reposeful ease, soft as downy feathers, a quietude, a shrinking from action, an appearance of inability to do. The heart is humble, for the work is forceful. Placidly free from anxiety, one acts in harmony with nature. One moves and revolves in the line of creation. The will to win. The attitude that you can win if you want to badly enough means that the will to win is constant, and no amount of punishment, no amount of effort, or no condition is too tough to take in order to win. Such an attitude can be developed only if winning is closely tied to the practitioner's ideals and dreams. Experience shows that an athlete who forces himself to the limit can keep going as long as necessary. It means that ordinary effort will not tap or release the tremendous store of reserve power latent in the human body. Extraordinary effort, highly emotionalized conditions, or a true determination to win at all costs will release this extra energy. Therefore, an athlete is actually as tired as he feels, and if he is determined to win, he can keep an almost indefinite will in order to achieve his objective. I can walk away from millions because it's not right, but I'll be damned if I'll back up an inch from a dime because it has to be so. Is free will caused by our own volition or by God? This is a theological problem of the Middle Ages. Or is it governed by causal law? The term free then becomes the grandson of chance. If human actions are governed by causal law, the problem then becomes that there is no actions that are voluntary. There is no weapon more deadly than the will. Unquestionably, man has his will, but woman has her way. The spiritual power of man's will removes all obstacles. What does self-willed mean? Does it mean having a will of one's own? The human herd instinct demands adaptation and subordination, but for his highest honor, man elects not the meek, the supine, but precisely the self-willed man, the heroes. Self-will seems to be the only virtue that takes no account of man-made law. What does self-willed mean? Hell, isn't it knowing above all that indeed one is the captain of one's soul, the master of one's life? Now, what causes such realization and consequently brings about a change in one's behavior? To be real, to accept responsibility for oneself. A self-willed man has no other aim than his own growth. He values only one thing, the mysterious power in himself which bids him live and helps him to grow. His only living destiny is the silent, ungainsayable law in his own heart, which comfortable habits make it so hard to obey, but which to the self-willed man is destiny and Godhead. When discussing dreams, Bruce Lee says, yesterday's dreams are often tomorrow's realities. To be a practical dreamer, you must be backed by action. Practical dreamers never quit. Right now, I can project my thoughts into the future. I can see ahead of me. I dream. Remember that practical dreamers never quit. I may now own nothing but a little place in a basement, but once my imagination has got a full head of steam, I can see painted on a canvas of my mind a picture of a fine big 5 or 6 story Kung Fu Institute. I am not easily discouraged. Readily visualize myself as overcoming obstacles. The way to bring back the dream is to relive the dream as if it were happening now. Put the different fragments of the dream together and re-own these projected fragmented parts of our personality and re-own the hidden potential that appears in the dream. The re-owning equals the understanding of our projections. And finally, when talking about spirituality, Bruce Lee says, the cultivation of the spirit is elusive and difficult, and the tendency toward it is rarely spontaneous. The spirit is no doubt the controlling agent of our existence. As to its whereabouts, we can never tell. Though altogether beyond the realm of corporeality, this invisible seat controls every movement in whatever external situation it may happen to find itself. It is thus to be extremely mobile, no stopping in any place at any moment. When man comes to a conscious, vital realization of those great spiritual forces within himself and begins to use those forces in a science, in business, and in life, his progress in the future will be unparalleled. Recognize and use the spiritual power of the infinite. The intangible represents the real power of the universe. It is the seed of the tangible. I feel I have this great creative spiritual force within me that is greater than faith, greater than ambition, greater than confidence, greater than determination, greater than vision. It is all these combined. My brain becomes magnetized with these dominating forces which I hold in my hand. Intensity or enthusiasm is this God within us, one that instinctively becomes the art of the physical becoming. And within this transition, we no longer care to know what life means. We are indeed furnishing the what is by simply being. The integrating principle of the whole, the spirit, as it were, of the universe, instinct with contrivance, which flows with purpose. I wish neither to possess nor to be possessed. I no longer covet paradise. More important, I no longer fear hell. If you ask me what I will do in heaven, I will say this: why should I think about something so far away when there are so many things in this life I have not finished learning about? 4 questions on the existence of God. Can we know that God exists? How do we know God exists? What do we mean God exists? And do we have an idea of God? I have no religion whatsoever. I believe that life is a process and that man is a self-made product. The spirit of the individual is determined by his dominating thought habits. Religions divide people, just as styles in martial art divide people. If all the religions of the world were one, the world would be united in brotherhood. Some people fight with others because they believe in different religions. If, however, they only gave the matter a bit of thought, they would never fight for such a foolish cause. The source of trouble in religion is to attribute to the cause with doctrines and rules and prejudices. And I want to read this again. Discard all thoughts of reward, all hopes of praise and fears of blame, all awareness of one's bodily self, and finally closing the avenues of sense perception, let the spirit out as it will. According to Zen, the spirit is by nature formless and no objects are to be harbored in it. When anything is harbored there, psychic energy loses its balance. Its native activity becomes cramped and no longer flows with the stream. Where the energy is tipped, there is too much of it in one direction and a shortage of it in another direction. Where there is too much energy, it overflows and cannot be controlled. In either case, it is unable to cope with ever-changing situations. But when there prevails a state of purposefulness, which is also a state of fluidity or mindlessness, the spirit harbors nothing in it, nor is it tipped in one direction. It transcends both subject and object. It responds empty-mindedly to whatever is happening. Not to localize or partialize is the end of spiritual training. When it is nowhere, it is everywhere. When it occupies 1/10, it is absent in the other 9/10. Let a person discipline himself to have the mind go on its own way instead of trying deliberately to confine it somewhere. It is the one without opposite, infinite, and increasing. On meditation, Bruce Lee says, it is not introversion, it is not a technique of introversion by which one seeks to exclude matter and the external world, to eliminate distracting thoughts, to sit in silence emptying the mind of images, and to concentrate on the purity of one's own spiritual essence. Zen is not a mysticism of introversion and withdrawal. It is not acquired contemplation. To think that this insight is a subjective experience attainable by some kind of process of mental purification is to doom oneself to the error and absurdity, mirror wiping Zen. At this moment, stop inwardly. When you do stop inwardly, psychologically, your mind becomes very peaceful, very clear. You can really look at this. Do not separate meditation as a means from enlightenment as an end. The two were really inseparable, and the Zen discipline consisted in seeking to realize the wholeness and unity of prajna and dhyana in all one's acts. There is no difference between such enlightenment and what is ordinarily termed knowledge, for in the latter, a contrast exists between the knower and the known, whereas in the former there can be no such contrast. After the completion of cultivation, one's thoughts continue to be detached from phenomenal things, and one still remains amid the phenomenal yet devoid of the phenomenal. Real meditation puts you in the now. We do not come, we are. Don't strive to become, but be. Meditation is not concentration. Meditation surely can never be a process of concentration, because the highest form of thinking is negative thinking. Negation is not the opposite of positive, but a state in which there is neither the positive nor its reaction as the negative. To meditate means to realize the imperturbability of one's original nature. Meditation means to be free from all phenomena, and calmness means to be internally unperturbed. There will be calmness when one is free from external objects and is not perturbed. We are vortices, whose center is a point that is motionless and eternal, but which appears in manifestation as motion, which increases in velocity in the manner of whirlpool or tornado, from nucleus to periphery. The nucleus is in reality, whereas the vortex is phenomenon in the form of a multidimensional force field. Hold to the core. And that is a small portion of the many wonderful teachings of Bruce Lee. And who would have thought such a great martial artist was also this incredible thinker and had what appeared to be advanced knowledge about some of these subjects. I was just impressed by his use of language and descriptions. It was motivational and powerful. The most interesting thing to apply this, if you go back to other teachings on the reality revolution, when we talk about balance in transurfing, he's talking about that right here. He's talking about the importance of considering balancing forces and flowing like water, the Taoist concept. You go with the flow, which he would do in his fights. But he's giving this example as a life philosophy. And consider balancing forces. And check out my episode on balancing forces. When you really badly want something, then you'll never get it. You create these balancing forces. Nature always works in balance. When you watch water, it always goes to level. So you can see him considering these dynamics of natural balance within the flow of his thought and action. He explains very clearly the importance of taking action, that just sitting and thinking is not enough, that thought follows physical action. And I thought his message was very motivational on that point. Clearly, he talks about imagination, and you could use the teachings in this as an advanced imagination course. He talks about how ideas come, how to come up with ideas. I thought it was very interesting and well thought out and a lot of fun to consider the wonderful teachings of Bruce Lee. Now, small side note, as I have done these episodes, I felt like the authors come to me and they talk to me, and I felt that with Bruce Lee. I felt like he was really excited for me to read some of his stuff, and that he always felt like what his teachings he had were never given the proper attention that they deserved. Clearly, he was well read, well thought, well taught on the ways and philosophies of the universe, and created a very powerful life philosophy in applying action and in influencing his own subconscious mind, in respecting its will, understanding the forces of will, and emotionalizing an idea that he wanted, finding his purpose and moving towards that purpose. And he found his definite chief aim. He very easily made the $10 million that we talked about at the beginning. So my question to you is, do you have your chief aim? And do you see how important it is? You are just as amazing and wonderful as Bruce Lee, and you can apply these teachings yourself. What is your definite chief aim? Write it down in the comments. I would love to see it, and I will imagine your definite chief aim being accomplished for you. Please subscribe to the channel and like this video. And thank you so much for joining me on this unusual excursion and trusting me that we would have some information here that would help you out. And thank you for sticking all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.